All right, welcome everyone. We've got some folks joining us here. Thanks for waiting in the waiting room. We'll wait a few more moments here as some familiar faces join us. Welcome from across the state of Illinois and beyond. We're thrilled that you're here. You are welcome, if you feel comfortable, to turn your camera on and join us for our conversation tonight. We're going to be recording the session, you can see, so if you don't feel comfortable having your mic on or excuse me, your camera on, that is fine, but we are thrilled to have you here, and more might be joining for our conversation hosted by the IAHPERD Higher Education Committee. We've got three panelists here who are going to start us off and kind of jumpstart our conversation today as we talk about designing for the future in higher education, and specifically teacher education, teacher training. We are thrilled to have you here, and we have the chat box open. So there's a couple meeting norms here for the next 60 minutes or so. Please jump into the chat box and introduce yourself, your name and where you're from. And we're going to use the chat box throughout our conversation today. So if questions come up, if you have ideas that you just don't feel comfortable unmuting and bringing to the table, please use the chat box to spur that conversation. I'll be watching that as well as our panelists. And if you have answers to questions that you see in the chat box, please contribute. We want this to be a space where all voices are here, welcome and heard. So my name is Dr. Emily Jones. I'm a faculty member at Illinois State University, and I'm chair of the IAHPERD Higher Education Committee. And we are joined here by three panelists, three of my colleagues here in the state of Illinois as well. Dr. Julia Valley is at Northeastern Illinois University. Julia, thanks for joining us. Dr. Carlos Arzuaga from Concordia University of Chicago. Carlos, thanks for joining us. And Andrew Eberline, a colleague at Illinois State University. Andrew, thank you for being here. So we have a series of questions that I'm going to pose to the group, and some of these might be easy one-off questions, and others might require us to think and brainstorm a bit. I'm going to pose them to the panel, and then we're going to open it to others who have joined us today. So my first question is one that we've probably heard throughout the last 12 months because we have done a lot of learning and growing. So I'm interested in hearing what are some top one or two takeaways or professional lessons that you have had across the past 12 months as it relates to teaching and training future teachers at your institution and beyond. So I'll open it to the panel, and then we'll open it up to others. If you've got comments in the chat box, go ahead and drop those in too. So top two takeaways, lessons learned. Julia, yes.
Sure, I'll be happy to start us off. Hello, everyone. It's good to see a lot of familiar names, both from my institution and across other institutions. So I think some of the, fortunately, we had these questions a little ahead of time, so we had time to think about some of the questions that were being asked today. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've kind of taken from both the fall semester and this semester, and also pivoting last spring, has been that sometimes less is more in this context. And I feel like sometimes we're very agenda or task oriented. And I think students really need an opportunity to connect. So I always take time in face-to-face to try to get to know my students, to try to develop some community. And I think it feels less authentic in a Zoom atmosphere, but in remote learning, I think it's probably in these times more valuable. So not necessarily over planning, but building in opportunities to talk to each other to allow the students to connect. And that's obviously a little bit more geared towards the fully remote structure that we've had. I also would say the other takeaway would be we had to be more flexible in these times, but we still had to hold students accountable to a certain standard of expectations and accountability. And that, I think that's always a difficult balance with classes at universities, but we had to be flexible, but we also still want a certain level of quality.
I can jump in next just to, oh, sorry, Carlos, did you want to go?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can go, Andrew.
Okay. Thanks. Just to kind of piggyback, I think one of the items I wrote down was increased sense of empathy and compassion. This was there before, but I found myself really, you want to toe the line between having these high expectations for preparing future professionals, but also being very understanding of all these individual situations, right? The pandemic's hard on all parties involved. And so I think kind of going to that point, introducing some of those things and try to have that intentional time was part of my agenda as well. I implemented, and I got this idea from my wife, but just starting off with a question of the day, which is nothing standout, but it's surprising the things that the conversations that can come from just this little bit of time where we're kind of focused on things that are not necessarily that kind of agenda focused. And I think the other piece I had was just the reinforcement of the idea of the power of educational technology, the chance to pivot on the fly and to do all the things, and the fact that in 2021 we could actually pull this off is pretty incredible if you think about it. And just the amount of opportunities that we're able to extend and take from this. Obviously, it's not ideal. I think we're all probably pining for getting back into the schools and being together for those of us who are not able to be in person. But I think there's also some interesting places you can go, as far as I can grab a colleague of mine down in Florida and say, hey, would you jump in on a Zoom and have a conversation with my class? Things that might not necessarily happen if we're just kind of going with the typical semester or so.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to just piggyback on that too as well. I think we're all going through the same thing when it comes to, I think we all have similar stories, but the one thing, probably one takeaway is, especially for my student teachers, are they getting the authentic experience? Once this is all over with, they didn't get the authentic experience during student teaching where they could be live in a gym in front of students. I think there's still youth. I mean, even though some schools still have a hybrid model, but I mean, a couple of my student teachers last semester, I mean, they were fully on Zoom. I just felt like they were cheated out of the experience. Not that it was by choice. I mean, it was kind of mandatory that they had to teach remote. I think that's one takeaway. And probably the other takeaway is kind of like the hybrid model as well. Because right now I'm teaching in a hybrid class where students are able to jump back and forth, like if they want to be on Zoom or not. And then technology as well sometimes doesn't work. And this is what I try to teach my students, that even when you are teaching in a class, you are going to have hiccups, you are going to have errors, you are going to have challenges. Technology is supposed to make everything easier for everyone, but guess what? I think most of you can agree with me that sometimes technology doesn't cooperate. So like, for example, today, I mean, I had a volleyball, someone was teaching a volleyball lesson and things weren't going well. So that was a perfect opportunity to tell my students, hey, what do you do when this happens to you when you're going to teach and you have 25, 30 students in front of you? So, the technology part has been challenging for all of us, I think. I'm not sure for many, but I know for some of my students, we have to kind of be sensitive and empathetic to that as well. But we also don't want our students to take advantage of that as well as an excuse. So, we want to prepare them to be teachers, once they're done. And I just feel like they've gotten cheated through this experience.
I would love to hear some. We've got quite a range of different folks on this call. I'll kind of shout praises. So glad that you're here. We've got students, we've got faculty from across our state and beyond. If you've got some thoughts you want to share, I'd love to hear. We've got some doctoral students, some students in training, teachers in training, and some other colleagues. What are some of the lessons that you've learned? I see some great chat in the conversation in the chat here too. So go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself if you would, just a quick name, and jump on in if you would like.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Wida. I'm a lead kinetic wellness teacher at DePaul College Prep on the north side of Chicago. And thank you to all the panelists for leading today. It's already some great information and a lot of things that I could connect with too, that I felt parallels to. I wrote in the chat, my first takeaway was witnessing firsthand how important our relationships really are with our students. Having empathy for them, establishing that connection with them, employing, the we're in this together, and letting them realize that we are in this together absolutely just maximized my student engagement. My first semester, unlike PE, I was giving out assignments, and unlike I've ever experienced in my 10 years, out of every single assignment I gave out to all 6 of my classes, I had 98% completion rate. On the summative assessments at the end of the semester, students across the board, freshmen through seniors, averaged a 94%. So my engagement was fantastic. Their attendance was fantastic. Quite shocking because I was really expecting the latter. And number 2, this unbelievably indirect way that we've grown as professionals to adopt and implement new tools related to distance learning and technology implementation that otherwise, had COVID never existed, we might have not received all this wonderful PD that we've had over the last 12 years. So I suppose a little bit of a silver lining there as well.
Michael, that's really good insight. I appreciate you sharing that. And welcome from DePaul. That's awesome. While others chime in, either in the chat or kind of drum up some courage, I love to see the connections here with kind of the intentionality and the silver lining. I appreciate that a lot because there's a lot of idea sharing that has been very rich and generative, and I've been able to connect and partner with folks that I perhaps wouldn't have been able to learn from before. It's one of those crazy things when we're all in it, then everyone adapts in some way and can get on board rather than only maybe some early adopters who might be interested or willing to engage. So
that also reminds me of that kind of idea along the silver linings of trial by fire. And so, okay, we have to figure this out. We have to do this. But I think it also lends itself to a really cool opportunity to learn with our students and to just say, okay, we're going to try this today. I have no idea if it's going to work, and just that's okay. And just kind of, modeling that best practice or that type of behavior. And then I had a thing, I don't know if any of you have heard of Gather Town before. It's a way to get into breakout rooms, but it's like Nintendo to Super Nintendo level graphics. So you become a little avatar and you can move around in space. And anytime you get near someone, your screens pop up. And so you have a little choice as far as, okay, I see this group of people, let me go talk to them. And so I tried that for one of just kind of a exam prep kind of worksheet thing to do for a review of my class. And then today it was kind of like, okay, let's break it down. Was this valuable at all? What would you think about it? And kind of doing that and going along those lines. So yeah, I agree. I think there's some kind of push the envelope as far as what expectations and what teaching can be in this 21st century.
Yeah, I just want to just piggyback off of Michael, what he said, being empathetic. I had spoke with an athletic trainer, and, I have a daughter in high school, and the amount of like the mental health with this whole pandemic has been, I don't know if people are blind to it or are not aware of it, but it is very serious, especially at the high school level. But at our school, our athletic trainer, they've experienced athletes losing 25, 30 pounds during the pandemic. And they say they've dealt with more mental health issues than actual athletic injuries. So, I think that's the part where we have to be empathetic as well with our students. The fact that they're going through this during their college years when they should be, in our college years, I think we all kind of had fun during our college years. And I think that was their expectations. And then last year, they we're throwing this curveball, and now we're still shut down, and who knows where we're going to be at, in the next few months.
And in addition to that, Carlos, that's a great point. We're also we're continuing to work through the social justice injustices that we're seeing in the country, and trying to be intentional in addressing those, not being insensitive to the stresses that our students are experiencing that we can't even really imagine unless you've been in their shoes, or and you create an environment for them to feel and be safe to express themselves. So let's kind of look ahead, right? So we're going to look back, but look ahead too. So the next question, panelists and everyone on the call here, is this could be applicable for students. If you can put yourself in the shoes, faculty members, put yourself here, is what strategies have you found effective, right, within your program, your teaching, or let's say your studies, to be successful, right, in response to COVID, and the all of which has now been layered within the last 12 months and beyond of this kind of abnormal space. So what have you done to respond? And then I want to tag on to that is, what are you going to keep in the future? Okay, what has been useful and effective?
I can lead off. I think trying to offer as much variety as possible has been helpful. I teach a twice a day or twice a week class, and I try to go on one day, off the other, and just try to offer different variations for things that they can do on the asynchronous days. And then when they, whether it's dropping in lectures beforehand and have them reviewing, so then we can have, deeper and rich conversation when we are meeting via Zoom. I think increasing time ranges on quizzes and exams, because those are happening out of class. So, I don't care if you take it at 1:00 on Mondays when I have my class. Take the week, find a time that works for you. As long as here's the time period, this is what it can be. I just need to be done by, by Friday, so that way I can grade it over the weekend or what have you. So I think there's some things, that's kind of some of the themes we've already talked about today, a little bit about that flexibility piece. I think that's something that I found to be effective.
So along those lines, I think we are always encouraging our developing PE teachers to be reflective practitioners. And I think that we really benefited from that as faculty from the fall semester to the spring semester. There were huge changes for our clinical program, for everybody, what you can do, what you cannot do. So the first semester, we kind of held off on releasing Atlas videos. We had only so many Atlas videos to give, so we held off, and we didn't want to give them all out at the same time. And then we were trying to discover throughout the fall semester, what are ways that our students can get these, state mandated hours that they have to have for licensure. And so we pooled all of those ideas and offered them more in the sort of front loaded those in the spring semester. And I think that's gone very well. And we've got Shape webinars, we've got Gopher webinars. We have the Atlas videos that we would just give out as soon as they would ask. We'd give them Atlas videos. They would write up reports on them, and also reaching out to teachers who we have a little bit more of a challenge with CPS, with Chicago Public Schools. They're totally overloaded with student teachers, so they couldn't give clinical students the same level of access. And for confidentiality and privacy for students, they just couldn't be in contact with students. So reaching out to some of the more suburban schools and just developing partnerships where if you have the opportunity to let students just observe, you teach in this environment. And we had a lot more of that in this semester than we did in the fall. And we've gotten, and we have students here right now that are experiencing that in this meeting. So maybe you could speak to that too, but not to put anyone on the spot. But I think they've been really appreciative of that. Like this is, I'm seeing what PE teachers are doing in the moment, and not only seeing it, but actually recognizing that they're excelling. Kind of what you had said, Andrew, in that what amazing leaps we've taken professionally and what grace we've shown each other in making those mistakes. I've tried to use Jamboard both semesters, and I'm failing pretty miserably with it because my students don't have the level of access with it that I expect they should be able to have. I copy the link. I make sure they're editors. They say, Dr. Valley, we can't do anything with it, or we can't create our own Jamboard. So then we just pivot to Google Docs. So I think giving each other some latitude with, we're going to keep trying to work on incorporating new strategies, and they just might not work. So.
Yeah, Julia, just to piggyback off of you, Andrew, I think we've all kind of had to relearn how to teach this past year, right? Especially through remote learning or hybrid learning. I think we all went back to school sort of to learn on our own and doing these panel discussions so we could piggyback off each other's ideas. But, Andrew, I did the same thing with my classes. The fact that, if they have to take an exam or something, I pretty much give them their own time. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of the students were appreciative of that because they had other professors and other subject areas where they were like, no, you have to take it at this time. So that flexibility, the students really, really appreciated that. And I think that was pretty effective, because when we talk about the social emotional part, some of these kids, some of these professors are not looking at that, at that context that, these students are loaded. Some of the professors think that we're still in person. That's not the case. But giving them that flexibility, they were very appreciative of it. And I've had many students have told me that. We appreciate that we don't have to take it at this time, during class time. We could take it whenever we feel like it. So that did help a lot as well.
Just in our conversation and seeing, I think Jim and some other people in the chat, other things I've thought about in terms of, and kind of this dovetails a little bit into what are the things we're going to keep. I've had my students go through Google Classroom trainings, right? So it's like, okay, here's a technology-based thing that can go on a resume, that can help with marketability. But then that's also something where a lot of schools are Google schools where, hey, you can slide right in and have access and understanding of this. And so I think those are some things that I see that, in a methods class where I can't get you the hours and the access that I'd love to give you this time, here, let me at least give you something where here's a skill that you can grab a hold of and talk about efficiently in an interview, right, to help separate you from the pack. So I think those are some things where, how can I set, our whole life is how do we set our students up for success? And so this just kind of, changes the angle as far as the direction of how we kind of point them.
And just because, we're flexible, like with our like you said, for your test time, it doesn't mean that you're giving in. It's just giving them, like you said, giving them the opportunity to be successful. So, some professors feel like if they give some flexibility that, they're giving in. No, it's not that you're giving in. You're just giving them an opportunity, to take a test at their time, like you said, but also, it's not like it doesn't mean that they've won. The students have won. It's okay to be flexible with your students. I think a lot of professors or a lot of teachers get this stigma where they don't want that change where we give flexibility to students, which is not the case. I mean, I think students do appreciate that when they have some flexibility and some say.
I think a lot of us are in information overload and new tool, fill in the blank, right? It's just so many new things, and where do you find information can get a little daunting, especially in our school university. They've streamlined some spaces, virtual platforms, where student organizations would have all of the information post there in terms of events or workshops that were coming up or trainings or now vaccine clinics. The students can go to Redbird Life and they can see what clubs are meeting when and what meeting times are happening and how, Zoom calls or virtual festivals or whatnot. And so as a program, this is a little bit different than what I'm doing in our classes, but as a program, we've started to utilize Microsoft Teams as our hub for information for our majors. Now it's kind of in a pilot mode, if you would, because we launched it start of COVID, and it was a new tool. And although it's an institutional tool, not everyone was yet familiar with it. So what the Microsoft Teams site does for us is that we've invited all of the majors within our program who have a major code, who are first semester or through student teaching. And that's where we put information about scholarships or major specific deadlines or registration that they just need to be mindful of, and also showcasing and celebrating the student achievements or successes, or doing some best as we can to try to get them to that page, to that site, so that they can engage, because we don't have hallway conversations right now with the students, and even our Zoom meetings or our virtual meetings, or if they're face-to-face, we just feel there's always so much to cram into that instructional time that this Microsoft Teams platform is kind of our attempt to stay connected, to build community, and kind of a next generation is getting our alumni and our advisory council teamed in to Teams so we can have some interactions between our undergraduate students and our alumni group. So that's one thing that we're really trying to be intentional, so that people still feel like they belong to us and we belong to them, and they can have some affiliation with the program instead of just matriculating through via classes only.
If I have it right, if you have an Office 365 subscription, you would have access to Teams. So we're a Microsoft school, but if that's something you were interested in looking at, and kind of mess around with that through your subscription, 365.
Thanks, Andrew. Good point. Go ahead and unmute if you've got something else that's been working for you. Please share. We'd love to hear.
I can speak from like a student's perspective. I'm a clinical student and a student at Northeastern, and I think activity that really worked, that seemed to be good, that Dr. Valley and some of the other instructors there used, was like icebreakers, where you like turn off the camera, turn it on, and answer questions, and that kind of gets everybody engaged a little bit more. And I think the more you can do that, like it just, it helps with participation. And like as a future educator, we know like there's no more snow days, so this is here to stay. So, like learning all of that is an advantage just to help us out in the future. And we can use the snow day kind of as a motivational tool to let students know they get out early for the summer, just tying in ways to keep them motivated.
Yeah, that's a great point, Robert. I don't know. Who knows if snow days go away completely, but things have there's changes, right? Like we're not just going to say, okay, once the pandemic's over, we're going to jump back into how it used to be, right? So I think to your point of just kind of grabbing hold of some of those strategies or remembering what worked for you will serve you well in the future.
I'd like to add, hi everyone, it's Jim from NIU. Sort of like the last couple comments about just sort of flipping the timing in the format in which we offer our assignments and our tasks. And I put in the chat a few minutes ago about finding new ways to connect. And sometimes that's been like just giving out my cell to some students who I've reached out and spoken with at really odd times of the day and more odd times in the week or weekend. But just knowing that not exactly everyone is thriving in these circumstances, self included, but it's but sort of like throwing that bone has been really mutually beneficial. I found this time to be very rewarding, while also being extremely challenging in getting. I think it was Julia's comment at the beginning, like getting through the to-do list, and then being comfortable modifying the to-do list and reducing the to-do list in order to keep our heads. So I think the other point that I mentioned was similar to Andrew's comments about like extending windows of assignments being available. or being flexible with deadlines where it's more like part of modules and not so much about like this like hard, fast sequence of getting things done. Like there's a requisite amount of knowledge and we want to tack on these trainings because we are missing a lot in like the direct teaching of clinical experiences or practicums in schools. So, why not, while we're at it in this, alternate format, let's upskill in other ways that we can control more readily from home.
That flexibility piece reminded me that one of the strategies we used was if a group of students was taking 2 or 3 classes within PE, I would talk to those instructors and say, okay, when are your due days, right? So somebody likes a Sunday night, someone likes a Friday night. So a lot of times I ended up going middle of the week on Wednesdays. And so, I would set up weekly modules, but it would be literally Thursday to Wednesday and just say, okay, every Wednesday for consistency, this is when it's due, those type of things to try to help ground them in some ways in this kind of such ambiguous world. I mean, this place is my house, but it's also my office, but it's also my classroom. It's the worlds have collided and kind of mess with all of us in certain ways. So.
Jim kind of summarized some things there, brought some cool tie-ins, and which leads us sort of into my next question here, which the 2 things that Jim mentioned or summarized was kind of reducing the to-do list, all right, and also upskilling, he called, which another way that I've heard or used upskilling is also micro-credentialing, if anybody has come across that phrasing, where you can, I've got some associations, well, anyways, like there are free modules that you can go through like Amazon Web Service. I'm just going to throw that out there. That cost you nothing, but give you a credential for, building web pages. That's not my thing, but I'm just saying that there are free training sites like Andrew mentioned and Julia put in there, the Google Classroom training. Getting credentialed or getting upskilling yourself or your students so that they're better prepared, they're more marketable, they have a skill set that makes them, that's value added for them and the profession. So reducing the to-do list and also upskilling, putting Jim on the spot, is kind of contradictory because we're trying to reduce but also expand, which is awesome because it leads to this next point is we know that the landscape of education is changing. What we've done in the past is not going to be okay in the future. And how we've trained PE teachers perhaps is sufficient for now, but won't be sufficient for much longer, especially when we start to see outsourcing or perhaps boards of education wondering how they can be cost savings by not hiring and retaining PE teachers or allowing classroom teachers to deliver elementary physical education content, right? So this is far too familiar and too many heads are shaking as in, yeah, this is an issue. So what panelists and then beyond, please, let's brainstorm. We might not have the answer, but somewhere the answer might be in this room is what revisions do we need to make in PE teacher education or teacher training in higher ed in response of this changing landscape, right? Whether it's reducing the to-do list and trimming back what we do within our teacher education program so it's of greater quality, and or upskilling or micro-credentialing so that students and faculty are prepared to address the issues of social justice and equity and diversity and inclusion and whole of school approaches and movement education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the long question, which comes down to it, is what are we going to do in higher education to be responsive? Okay, we can't continue to do the same. And so we won't hold anybody to it here, but let's kind of put some ideas out there. So we'll open it to the panelists because they've had a little bit of time, but what revisions do you envision making to the PETE curriculum your plans of study, or how you teach, or how we prepare teachers to be effective?
Yeah, Emily. You know, it's interesting you said that, because I was just having that same conversation with some colleagues of mine about the fact of will this trend of online PE lead to districts saying, hey, you know, we kind of have an idea right here where we could probably hire someone to teach 50, students in elementary, middle school, or high school, and we don't have to pay for 2 positions. And I just feel like, I just hope that doesn't open the floodgates for that, because we do have a lot of great PE teachers, and I don't want to see that happening to them. And I don't want that discouraging future PE teachers who are trying to get into this profession, into this field. I kid you not, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I just had that conversation with someone. I said, that's very concerning for me, because of, what's been going on. And, and some districts are hurting for money. Their budgets are hurting. So this may be a kind of like an escape for them to say, hey, well, this worked during the pandemic. Why can't this work going forward after the pandemic? When it comes to social justice, equity, and diversity, we do have conversations in our class, at the college level. And I always tell everyone, respect everyone's response. But, at the high school level, or, middle school, that may be sensitive for some. And, opening that conversation, I think we have, everybody could agree with me or not, but I think we kind of have to open that conversation so we don't feel embarrassed or resistant, but just, being careful on what we say.
So one of the first things that I think of is, I think last spring when COVID hit, it was kind of like everybody had to pivot. Nobody's prepared for this. And I don't think we can't ever say that again, whether it's from the perspective of someone teaching PE having to pivot to remote, or from the faculty's perspective of, I'm teaching a college course and I need to know how I can do this in a remote way. And I know that I had a colleague who's now in, I think he's at Chico State in California. He was studying online physical education in like 2005 when we were in grad school. And to a lot of people's chagrin, like we can't stand that idea. We are in this so that children will be moving, and as faculty, we want to be in the gymnasium. And so they were and he was just identifying that it's here, that it's something that we need to question. Were we preparing our PE majors to be able to do this? And I think the answer is no, we weren't. I think people did a remarkable job in the midst of the circumstances, but I do think we have to fit this into we have to continue to keep it in and continue to fit it in to our higher ed curriculums. And I think we already try to fit so much in. So I don't think that's necessarily easy. I see it kind of being a part of the methods courses for intro, for secondary, for elementary education, or elementary physical education. I think we're going to have to build it in so that we just don't have that excuse anymore of, well, we didn't know this was going to happen, so we weren't ready for it. And I do hope, to what Carlos was saying, I hope that doesn't get taken advantage of in a negative way by administrators who are looking to do more with less money. I think there's value to it. I think we can address the cognitive domain really effectively, but we need to be also in person. I don't think it should be abandoned because of this experience.
Yeah, Julia, I don't know if we could play 6x6 volleyball through Zoom. So those team sports, I think we need the team sports. We have to be in person or play 5-on-5 basketball.
I will say I've been a little blown away at the creativity of my students,
Yes.
where we say, you've got this lesson to teach, you don't have a lot of equipment, and go. And I've been sort of blown away by what they've been able to do. I had students teaching in our individual, and now we consider it net, wall, and target games. Mm-hmm. They're teaching a game of cornhole where they put students in breakout rooms and they're playing against each other, and they use a towel for the board, and then people are using wadded up socks as they're practicing with really good technique, giving great feedback. Yep. I just think, but I agree, team sports becomes a lot more challenging, but some of these other lessons, they've really risen to the occasion and they've done an exceptional job.
Yeah,
And
my
so proud.
my students last semester in individual dual sports, they same thing. Now that you mention that, kind of, they blew me away. I mean, I was so proud of how they responded, with the lessons that we're teaching online, giving feedback, and everyone on Zoom getting involved with the lessons. So yeah, they were pretty creative. Let me put it that way. It was not what I was expecting.
Yeah, they've taken a difficult situation and they've had really good and positive attitudes. And I know it's not easy. I agree with what Jim said. Like, my wife goes to work at a library. She's not totally essential, but she's out there. And I have to remind her, you're out and you're interacting with people. I'm looking at a screen most of the time. And it's just a different reality that we didn't enter into our professions to be isolated. We entered into these professions to be with people. And that's probably that's what our personality types are.
It's too bad that and I'll refer to last March as the first March of the pandemic, but it's too bad we couldn't bottle that sentiment of, oh, teachers, we never knew how hard your job was, or my kid's going crazy around the house, they really need to be acting, all those things that we heard, and the reports and the new, all the different things where that piece, all those that information was out there. And it's like, yes, we've been saying this all of our professional lives, right? And we've known it intuitively before that. And so I'm with you as far as leaning on kind of those beginnings of the pandemic, as far as when we advocate and we talk about the importance. And, in some ways, if we're to go back to the idea of that silver linings, everyone experienced that, right? And so if you were a parent at that time, you can hopefully draw on those experiences when you go to advocate to your school board, to go to the Capitol and those different things, to really try to push for, I always come from, yes, I'm in higher ed now, but I'm an elementary PE teacher by trade. So I know the importance of that level of building that foundation. So that's definitely a goal. But I think, and it's been said across the panel, but just this idea of teaching remote, or being able to, hey, it's a teacher in service day, you're still having school, those type of situations are going to be a thing. And so I think those types of educational technologies, I'm interested in this anyway. So selfishly, I'm excited that I get to lean into that. And hopefully as a program that we can kind of keep making those adjustments as well to, again, it's always what's best for the students. And so it's a pretty easy sell when it comes to that, as far as making the case. So
I think one thing that has stood out to me, and I hope that we are intentional, is that we are preparing future teachers to understand that the lives of their learners doesn't end when the bell rings, right? That the connection between teacher and family, or school and community, is essential. And I think perhaps, I'll speak across my career, I have placed students and pre-student teachers in clinical experiences. And then that's sort of where my task ended, is in terms of getting them additional authentic experience. It was a time that they might get as in the methods class, or as part of those pre-student teaching clinical hours. But I think I see more and more, it's risen to the top for me, that I know at Northern, y'all do some really great things with community entities and beyond to get authentic experiences for your learners, undergrads and grad students, to see how impactful physical educators and health educators can have in the lives of kids and communities. So I hope to thread that and make that a stronger element within our undergraduate experiences for students. Hey students, what do you feel unprepared for? Oh boy.
I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert.
As a student, I think the most thing I would be kind of concerned about is just the atmosphere I'm going to, and not necessarily with the teachers, but just with like the staff, because I know a lot of teachers from our prior, what I'm currently doing, personal trainer and students. So like it's training a lot of teachers over the years, for the past 15 years, like a lot of it can get, from what they tell me with, just their coworkers. So it can get kind of like, trying to find that right fit. I think it'd be what I would be most like worried about.
I had a couple student teachers last semester, and my one student teacher, she taught on Zoom. Kids weren't required to be on camera. All she saw were names across the board, which made me sad because I feel like she's been cheated out of the experience. Even though she found a job, I just feel that, especially our students, depending how long this goes, and schools I'm hoping we're back face to face soon. So that our students that are here, my students, and every student who's in PE can get into a gym. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that everything does get better. But I just feel like some of these students, if we continue on this path, let's say another year, I feel like they're gonna be lost. I think once they get close to graduation, I'm hoping I give them the tools, and the content, so that when they do start teaching in person, that they're able to do it smoothly and in a correct manner. So I don't know how, students that are on here, from Northeastern, I see there's some here, how you feel about that.
So my name is Max Lecky. I'm from Northeastern. I'm also a part-time PE teacher. I've been a PE teacher at a Catholic school in Evanston for the past 3 years, for pre-K through 8th grade. So I would say my biggest, I guess not a concern, but just one thing that I wish I was able to get that experience, and because of COVID, I'm not, is just being able to get my feet wet in that scenario of, like, I've never really taught in a high school scenario. I've never been like in a high school PE teacher, like around a PE teacher or any of that type of stuff, like in that scenario. And I think like missing out on that kind of sucks, and not being able to have that opportunity and, kind of gain that experience and follow around a teacher and kind of see what they do besides just looking at them through Zoom.
It just made me think, and I don't know if anybody has thought about this, but the value and importance of mentorship programs for new teachers is going to probably be more critical than ever. So hopefully that's something that teachers that are have a little bit more experience can take some of our newer teachers under their wings, because I agree, there's nothing like being there in the school setting, in the school community and culture. It's just not something that can be provided right now.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought with the Robert situation, as far as how do I navigate the staff room and that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, your natural reaction is you'll figure that out in student teaching. But to your point, as far as that being a concern and how to navigate, that can be problematic at this time point. So sorry, Kathy, I think you were maybe getting ready to talk. Sorry if I cut you off.
No worries. I was just going to take it from an adapted physical education standpoint. I think there's, I think in the state of Illinois, and I've done a couple roundtables with IAHPERD, with adaptive physical educators across the state. They've done really good, but we're a creative bunch, and I think as a whole, we've had a lot of technology. I'd love to do some research on standard physical educators, because so many of them have learned technology to the point where there's so many more visuals for our kids that they can incorporate in the gymnasium, with overhead projectors and the whole bit, which is really evidence-based practice in terms of working with our kids with autism and other things. So I'm hopeful that some of that technology that isn't in physical education settings now will make its way there, because I think they see the value with ESL students, with kids with disabilities and that kind of thing. So I think that that's going to be important. The other thing is, I would just say on an aside, we need physical education for kids with disabilities and master's programs in adaptive physical education across the state. We've got one program at NIU left. And if we don't pivot to whatever, our people we're having to hire people from all over the surrounding states to try to get people. So from my perspective, that's a huge, long-term issue in Illinois. So anyhow, I was curious, did any of you have students that had accommodations, and how did you deal with that in your undergraduate, graduate classes?
I used to be a recreation major, and I did a lot of therapeutic recreation, and we actually had classes for credits where we did a lot of programs and like classes for students with special needs, and it's basically making basic modifications, like putting bells on the balls so they can kind of hear it, trying to make sure you follow methods such as KISS, keeping it short and simple where you're not overloading them with information. And it's probably one of my favorite areas, and I'll probably go into special ed in the future, especially with adaptive P, but just making little adjustments like that and listening to them and talking to them and just knowing a little bit of history about like what might set them off, like somebody with autism, like little certain noises might set them off, and knowing that, it gives me a little bit more confidence to make any kind of personal adjustments and things necessary for them.
Yeah, so faculty, did you guys have any students with accommodations?
I did have a student, I actually have a student this semester, and I had a couple last semester. And when we talked about like the extra time with testing, that was part of their accommodation. So when I gave them that, that selective time, when they wanted to take a test at their own time. So if the class was probably an hour and 15 minutes, then I will give them an hour 45 because you have to provide them extended time to take the exam to accommodate them. So I would just extend it to an hour 45 to 2 hours, whatever, just so the fact that they could finish the exam. Everybody else would probably finish, quicker, but they would have that extra time.
And I would say that was my experience as well, was students with learning disabilities, where they needed either extension deadlines for assignments or additional time and settings for taking online quizzes. I've also had some students where I've sort of said, we need a standing meeting weekly so that I can help you through some of the things that I think the Zoom meeting setting is so much more intimidating to ask a question and to ask to seek further understanding. That and I think students also have a hesitation that they look at it as, I don't want to bother you during your office hours. So I feel like I have to sort of say, no, I want to meet with you. I'm asking you to meet with me. Please do that. Because I know that there's a gap in what I've said and what you are comprehending, and I want to make that better, and I want to make that connection with you. So having some standing meetings has kind of helped with some of my students. But I do worry that I don't necessarily reach all the students who I know could use a little bit, further assistance or accommodations.
Kathy, yeah, we've had, I think, more. I think our Office of Accommodations at the institution has been busier in the last 12 months than ever before. And I'm not going to say that I'm happy for that, but I'm also pleased that students are advocating for their needs. So instead of perhaps not advocating and not seeking the supports that they do need, that they have been, we have more students seeking and being approved for accommodations, and it ranges, right, from time to the technology has helped facilitate some of those personal, individualized adaptations, right? So that you can have more time on a test, or you can have I should have done it now. I actually am now just thinking, duh, but you can have the live transcription on Zoom when you're in this meeting. So deaf and hard of hearing individuals, the back channel chat is another means of interacting and engaging for clarification. Yeah, it has been a bit of a challenge. It's important. So setting those students' needs first, but it's been a bit of a challenge because some of the difficulties with fatigue, Zoom fatigue or fatigue in the class, lots of people are experiencing that. And I'm sure especially those that have an exponential challenge beyond the typical. So to Kathy's point, looking at shortages for teachers, APE is what she identified. And that's something that actually, I think the U.S. Department of Education has invested a considerable amount of money across the next 5 years or even beyond to invest in doctoral education for adapted physical activity and physical education specialists, which is amazing to hear that monies and those supports are being funneled into institutions to train teachers to work in APE settings. We're also experiencing shortages of physical education teachers and health educators here in the state of Illinois and beyond. So we have a few more minutes, and if you didn't to pop off right at the 9 o'clock hour, I appreciate that. But the final question here is going to be talking about how we recruit students into our health, physical activity, physical education, APE wellness profession. I added a lot of the acronyms there because some of our colleges and universities include those elements, and our teachers are going out and teaching those areas when they're out in our K-12 settings. So in addition to recruiting high quality students, how do we recruit and attract students from diverse backgrounds so that they look like, sound like, and can connect to the students in our schools? And so the question is, and retention. So we'll start there. This will be our final question for the night.
I mean, I could kind of start this. I mean, I always tell all my students, I could give you everything by the book. I could tell you everything. I could tell you my experience, but you have to make that connection, and you have to go out and make relationships. When you start teaching, you're going to make relationships with your students. When we talk about diverse students, are we talking about, different races? Are we talking about, recruiting more, because I'll tell you right now, even in some of my classes, I have a lot of female PE majors, which is great. I tell them, I say, I think we need more female PE teachers in our profession. I think, that would help, especially with future female, if they're teaching at a high school, they could, promote that to female students to go to college and get a degree in PE. Even for students that come from diverse backgrounds, if it's Hispanic, African American, I taught in mainly Hispanic and African American areas, before I started at Concordia. So trying to get that message out to them that, there are opportunities out there for PE, for them to be PE teachers. But how do we send that message? I think that's the $1 million question, right? How do we get these students recruited? Like, do we start getting them in high school? I had a student probably a couple of years ago that told me that their high school counselor said that there will be no more PE jobs in the future, that not to go into PE. A high school counselor. They didn't tell me what school they were at, but this was what was told to them. And I think we just need to start sending that message that, if there's a shortage, and I heard that in the news about during the pandemic, that there's been more retired applications being submitted now during the pandemic than prior to the pandemic. And I think that's the message we need to send to our students. And that's the message I'm sending to them. It's like, hey, you're in this profession. You're going into this profession. There's going to be a job for you. There's a lot of people retiring. So this is a great opportunity. I know this pandemic sucks, but this is the time. It's actually a good time for you to be in it, because once you're done, there's going to be job opportunities for you.
You kind of struck a chord, Carlos, with the mention of what you've heard from advisors in the high school setting. I've heard that same thing, where the messaging isn't there in promotion of physical education. And that is a huge problem. I mean, when I saw this question, my first thought was Northeastern in itself has a problem with marketing and getting the name out there. When I was looking at universities, I knew about Northern, I knew about Eastern, I knew about U of I didn't know about Northeastern. And that's a big problem that we have a university have. And I know the new president we have is working on that, and just getting that message out there, getting that advertisement, because it's a 4-year college on the north side of Chicago that it just isn't as well known. But I think there needs to be more relationships developed with the high schools, so that messaging isn't just coming from advising. And I would love that if it came from faculty, but I don't know where that time comes from, because I feel that we are already so stretched thin. So I think that would be ideal, but I don't know. I don't really know the answer. I just have hopes.
Julie, I think are we the only 2 schools in the Chicago area that offers PE?
We might be.
Because we're on the northwest side. I mean, I know where Northeastern's at. We're right off of Harlem and Division, by Oak Park and River Forest area. So I think in the Chicago area, Concordia and Northeastern are the only PE programs that are available.
Where's Chicago State?
Chicago State, that's right.
There you go.
That's right, correct.
Does Chicago State still have a program?
Yes,
They do, okay.
that's where
Yes.
I went.
We still do.
Speak up, Dr. Kutame.
Yeah, we're still going strong.
Okay.
Yeah, we were part of until just 1st January. We were part of, our department was under a different chairperson. Someone was running, in fact, 2 departments, but we just got our department back. And then I'm now the new chair of the department. So we are there.
So you are here, okay. Sorry
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah, that's 3 in Chicago.
Julia, I think you make a good point. We're always feeling stretched for time in higher ed, and I think IAHPERD's done some good things where they're starting to make connections with CPS, and they're starting to look at the recruitment and retention. I know Mark and Becky Fulmer have taken that up as a charge, and there's more than them, but that's kind of the people that I've heard it from. And so I kind of see that as maybe a good place for the association, a strong one such as IAHPERD, that could be beneficial for all of us, to really start kind of getting that messaging out there, because time is such a valuable commodity for us. And that's not absolving us from that, but just recognizing that all the laundry list of things to do can be challenging. I think the other thing which recruiting, maybe not so much, but I also think closely tied to that is retention. And so I think anything we can be doing once they get to campus, and to have that kind of welcoming environment of that inclusive, and just really focusing on all are welcome regardless of where you come from, or any of the adjectives you want to put on things, any characteristics. I think that's another piece of just making sure that you're offering that welcoming environment, so that they're there and they're willing to stay and continue through. So I think that's another little piece, kind of an offshoot, but something that's important as well.
As I read the question for the first time, I was immediately going into like some of the late practicum experiences that our students have, as well as student teaching, where we might be able to have a direct line or a captive audience, which would be a cooperating teacher or a department chairperson or even a building principal, where we can ask for a few minutes of their time, or to get in front of high school students or middle school students with the under the pretense that it's never too early to advocate to your potential future university students about what PE and what adapted PE is and what physical activity is and how important each of those play into a lifetime of well-being and having positive interactions around movement. So I think just at very much like face level, those are some things that we try to do just through like the one-on-one interactions, and by no means are we close to figuring all that out. But I think we've taken a very small scale micro approach to that question 4.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about, like recruiting students, I think we've all done this in our classes where we've asked our students like, why PE? And they always said they always made that connection with someone in high school or in middle school that was a positive influence on them. And I'm sure some of these Northeastern students that are here today can probably say the same thing. Someone in their PE and their physical education classes made a positive influence. They made that connection to them. So think about those students, but then we hear about students that don't make the connection, with the PE teachers. We get even with other teachers and on campus, when they hear PE, they think roll out the ball. And I think we have to get rid of that stigma that we're all roll out the ball teachers, and that's not the case. And I tell my students and they tell me, some of my students tell me that's how my PE teacher was. And they come into our classes, into our team sports and individual dual sports. They learn a variety of activities. And I said, didn't you learn this at school? They go, no. So, it's kind of like, where you come from. I think everyone here who's going to PE is because of the fact that someone influenced them in some way in physical education.
I would love to see some sort of pipeline type of approach to our schools across Illinois or beyond, where we know that there's great potential geographically in pockets across the state or country where maybe the quality of the physical education program is so great, but also the diversity of the student body is also so great, and speaking some truth into and affirming, what is it that makes a great physical educator? What is it that makes a great adapted PE teacher? What is it, and can we communicate with those teachers and coaches and counselors and others within the community who might be connecting with high school sophomores, juniors, seniors, or even younger, if you would, that we could say, keep an eye out for some young people that have potential in these areas, right? In these attributes, and speak some truth into them it's possible. And Andrew and Julia and I have had different conversations across the time about, is education seen across different cultures and races as something that's feasible, right? Is it not, right? Is it something, are we seeing teachers of color entering the workforce and therefore being role models that, yes, you can be Black and brown and indigenous, Native folks, and you can teach and have this great influence. But we've got such a large population of Caucasian women in the United States. 80% are the workforce, for teaching workforce, and so it's an interesting dilemma that you run into, is what you see sort of translates to that's who teaches, right? So getting a wide range and diverse student body to recognize that, yeah, that's something that I could do. And I know that because I see someone who looks like me, who sounds like me, who understands me, and where I've come from perhaps, or my culture, and responds in a way that speaks some truth into me, that yeah, I would be a great teacher. And I think Carlos mentions it, right? When somebody tells you that, it's even that just like little tipping point of, I didn't think that that was something I was good at, but somebody pointed it out to me, and all of a sudden now I can't forget that that's something that someone noticed about me, and that makes a big difference. Well, it's 9 o'clock, a little bit past. I'm gonna close our conversation, our formal conversation. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, panelists, and thank you all who joined us and stuck with us. I think part of this is just continuing the conversation, sharing ideas, recognizing that the answer is somewhere in the room. Maybe we don't have it individually, but sharing those ideas together and recognizing that across Illinois and beyond, I'm saying Illinois because being hosted by IAHPERD, we have so many outstanding institutions and professionals here within the state, and sharing, pooling ideas and coming together, I think, is one of the things that gets me most excited about being here and being ready to face the challenges that lay ahead in trying to be proactive and responding to preparing teachers to go out and make a big difference in their communities. So thank you for all of you for what you do and for joining us and your insights. On behalf of IAHPERD Higher Education Committee, stay tuned and join us next time. Thanks.